Oddworld is one of the strangest franchises in the gaming space. Debuting on the PS1 with Oddworld Abe's Odyssey back in 1997, the Oddworld series has seen sporadic releases across countless consoles and handhelds for almost 25 years now. And while Oddworld has branched out across many genres over the years, it's the duo of PS1 platformers, Abe's Odyssey and Abe's Exodus, that remain arguably the series' most iconic entries. A remake of Abe's Odyssey, Oddworld New and Tasty, was released back in 2014, so naturally the next step for the franchise was a remake of Abe's Exodus, and that's where Oddworld Soulstorm comes in. While New and Tasty was a pretty one-for-one remake of Abe's Odyssey, Soulstorm is more of a reimagining of Abe's Exodus than a straight remake. While Oddworld has never really found much mainstream appeal, the series has managed to maintain a pretty strong cult following over the years. And while I appreciate how quirky and original the games are, the series has never fully clicked with me. I've tried several Oddworld games over the years, but usually end up falling off of them after a couple of hours. In fact, Soulstorm is the first Oddworld game I've actually finished. And while I feel like I now have a bit more of an understanding as to what it is people see in these games, I still didn't fully vibe with Soulstorm. For every moment I found myself enjoying Soulstorm, there was a moment of frustration right around the corner. Soulstorm took me on an emotional rollercoaster over the 15 hours I spent with it. I was endlessly alternating between being surprised by how much I was enjoying sections of it, to being frustrated with it, to being just downright bored playing it. Like its predecessor, Soulstorm stars Abe, a Madocan on a quest to free his fellow Madocans, who have been enslaved by an evil megacorporation. Something I really appreciate about Oddworld Soulstorm is just how unique it is. There's definitely nothing else quite like it on the market. Oddworld has a very imaginative and original style, with character designs that are unlike any other series. I particularly love how weird looking Soulstorm's enemies, the Sligs, are. The Oddworld games are also a lot more story heavy than you might expect at a glance, and the way they tell their stories exemplifies just how, well, odd the series is. Oddworld juxtaposes a fairly morose story that tackles some very heavy topics, with quirky characters, goofy voice acting, and some oddball humour. Since I've never been a big fan of the series, I definitely lacked context for parts of Soulstorm's story, but I was still able to follow the overarching story and was pretty impressed that this eccentric looking game carried such an important message about megacorporations abusing their power and mistreating the people working for them. So if you grabbed Soulstorm while it was on PS Plus and are wondering if you'll be lost jumping in here, I'd say you'll probably be fine. The main reason I've never liked the Oddworld games is because I've always hated how stiff their controls felt. Soulstorm controls markedly better than any of the prior Oddworld side-scrollers, but it's still far from perfect, which can make moments that require precision platforming frustrating. Soulstorm kicks off with a surprisingly action-packed and cinematic opening, as Abe runs through a level that's collapsing around him, all while dodging enemy gunfire. But once you're through this opening sequence, the pacing of Soulstorm slows down drastically, shifting to the more slow and methodical gameplay you'd expect out of an Oddworld game. This change of pace does feel a little jarring, and it's certainly not the only time Soulstorm ends up feeling strangely paced. In fact, pacing is something that Soulstorm struggles with the whole way through. Abe isn't a particularly powerful character. He'll die very quickly if he gets caught up in an enemy's attack, so you'll have to take advantage of a lot of different strategies and mechanics to get the better of the evil Sligs. One of the main ways you'll survive enemy encounters is through Soulstorm's stealth mechanics. Holding down L1 allows Abe to sneak, and you'll also be able to hide in the countless lockers littered around the environment. Stealth won't get you through every encounter though. Sometimes you'll have to take a more aggressive approach. Thankfully, Abe has special abilities that are provided by his voice. Abe can chant to send out an orb of energy that can activate objects in the environment and, more importantly, possess enemies to even the odds. A possessed Slig can be used to kill the other Sligs in the area, and when you're done with the possessed Slig, you can either knock them out or detonate them. Possessed enemies are even used for some light puzzle solving, as they're able to press buttons and pull levers to get you access to new areas. Possessing enemies, then using them against their own allies, is incredibly satisfying and led to my favourite moments in Soulstorm. The orb of energy generated by Abe's chanting can also be used to scout out areas ahead so you're not just blindly running into an ambush. Some areas in Soulstorm have machines that prevent Abe from using his chance, shocking him if he tries. These machines pop up a little too frequently in Soulstorm. While they're good once in a while to force you to mix up your playstyle, when you get too many of them in a level, it quickly gets annoying as they rob you of Soulstorm's most interesting mechanic. As you play through Soulstorm, you'll come across a myriad of different items for Abe to use. There's water bottles and fire extinguishers to douse flames that block your path, flares and torches to illuminate your way through dark caves, flammable brew bottles that can be used to extend fires to burn down walls, smoke bombs to create areas to hide, mines that can be planted to pick off enemies, and a bevy of items like hard candy and rocks that Abe can pelt at enemies to knock them out. There's even tape to bind enemies, so once they're knocked out they won't get back up. Crafting is a huge part of Soulstorm. Through searching lockers, dumpsters, and unconscious enemies, you'll find crafting components. These can be used to make everything from weapons like mines to antidotes to help sick Madokans. You can even craft upgraded versions of certain items. For example, you could combine hard candy with elastic bands to make a hard candy that can be bounced off walls to knock out sligs who were previously out of reach. Or you might combine soda with mints to create Fizzy Pow, an explosive that can knock out multiple sligs at once, or blow up chunks of the environment to create new pathways through. One of your main goals in Soulstorm is to free as many enslaved Madokans in a level as possible, then guide them to a portal that'll transport them to safety. When you have Madokans following you, they can be given simple instructions. You can tell them to wait, follow you, or hide, and you can even equip them with items to defend themselves. Sometimes the Madokans following you don't behave exactly how you want, which can be frustrating. Getting a group of Madokans within meters of a portal, only for them to fling themselves into spinning blades, is every bit as annoying as it sounds. There's also a very limited amount of voiceover for the Madokans, so you'll end up hearing the same lines of dialogue literally hundreds of times. Soulstorm's levels are riddled with traps that'll quickly obliterate Abe and his followers. Some of these traps, like mines, are able to be disabled. You'll run into mines a few times throughout Soulstorm, and they require pinpoint precision to deactivate. You'll notice a blinking light on top of the mines, and you need to hit square the split second it turns green to disable it. In some levels, you'll be able to gather Soulstorm's currency, moolah. Certain doors require a deposit of moolah to open, and you'll also find vending machines where you can buy items and crafting materials with your leftover cash. One of Soulstorm's most baffling design decisions was to include sections where you're forced to fight waves of enemies to provide cover for hundreds of fleeing Madokans. These sections are simply not fun. Combat is easily the weakest aspect of Soulstorm, so including sections that put such a strong emphasis on it is definitely not a good idea. To make matters worse, you're not even able to possess enemies in certain sections of these, so you're left just clumsily throwing countless objects at enemies. As I said before, the controls in Soulstorm, while vastly better than prior Oddworld games, are still not ideal, so trying to get through these sections often left me feeling like I was not only fighting against hordes of sligs, but also the game itself. All these sections do is highlight Soulstorm's shortcomings. Soulstorm is a difficult game, but I feel like it's difficult in a way that's more irritating than challenging. I like hard games when they're done well. Take the Souls games for example. They're some of my favourite games of all time. I love the way they juggle difficulty, because when I die playing Dark Souls or Bloodborne, I always know that it's my own fault, because I either misread an enemy's attack pattern or didn't react fast enough. When playing Soulstorm, I don't feel that way at all. I often feel like I'm dying not due to my own lack of skill, but because Soulstorm's controls often feel clunky and imprecise. On the upside, Soulstorm is extremely generous with checkpoints, which does mitigate some of the frustration. There are lots of hidden areas to find in Soulstorm, but they just don't feel that rewarding to discover. Most of the time, all you'll get for finding these areas is some royal jelly, which gives you health. They're also not all that well hidden, so you'll likely stumble across a good chunk of them just by playing the game normally. Soulstorm implements a karma system that's based around how many Madokans you save. Maintaining good karma is actually extremely important in Soulstorm, as this will determine which of the game's 3 endings you'll get. In fact, if you don't save enough Madokans along the way in Soulstorm, you won't be able to access the final batch of levels. I was pretty shocked by how crisp Soulstorm's visuals are. There's some very nice animation work, and the cutscenes in particular look quite remarkable. The dynamic feeling camera that tracks Abe through levels, zooming in and out at different points, also helps add some additional cinematic flair, though Soulstorm can occasionally be a bit too busy visually. In moments where the camera is zoomed out further, it's often easy to lose track of Abe, as there's usually a lot going on screen at any given time. Now we get to my biggest problem with Soulstorm, which is its length. I genuinely wish this game was half as long as it is. I honestly think that if Soulstorm was in the 6 to 8 hour range, it could have been a very good game. But at 15 hours, Soulstorm is far too long for its own good and massively outstays its welcome. It simply doesn't do enough to justify its lengthy runtime. It's far too repetitive, and several of the mechanics have already grown stale long before the credits roll. Levels fluctuate wildly in length, ranging anywhere between 30 minutes and an hour and a half. So you never really know what kind of time investment Soulstorm is expecting from you level to level. The longer levels of Soulstorm really feel like they drag on forever, padded out by needlessly long combat encounters. And while gorgeous, a lot of the cutscenes are also way too long for how little they actually add to the overarching story. Oddworld Soulstorm is an incredibly uneven experience that I truly wish I could like more. Over the 15 hours it took me to beat Soulstorm, my thoughts on the game fluctuated wildly. I went from liking it to hating it, to ultimately thinking that Soulstorm is just an aggressively mediocre game. While I'm sure longtime Oddworld fans will probably find a lot to like here, a lot of the problems I've always had with the series remain present in Soulstorm. And because of the game's overly long runtime, the bad ultimately started to outweigh the good for me. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, subscribe or leave a comment for lots more reviews, including my upcoming reviews of Resident Evil Village, New Pokemon Snap and Returnal.